Annie's going to tell us how to crash an ARF quickly. Thank you, Annie. Hi, I'm Tim. Join me in this video as I'm going to show you 3 easy ways to crash your brand new ARF. The first 2 ways you'll crash within seconds. The second one will take a little bit longer, 4 or 5 minutes, but it will crash. Let's get to it. I've been building, designing, flying RC model airplanes for over 50 years. I really enjoy building and flying the models. But recently I've gotten more and more involved in ARFs, or almost ready to fly RC models. And I've got to say the quality of the ARFs these days are just out of sight. The quality is good, the cost is good, they're very affordable, and more importantly, they fly really well. But what I realize is I'm building these ARFs, they are so well designed, go together so quickly that you tend to lose sight of some basic flying and aerodynamic things that you need to know to keep from crashing. So what I want to do in this video is just touch upon 3 of the top ones that if you don't follow what I'm going to tell you to do, your shiny, well-built, well-designed, almost ready to fly RC model will crash within seconds of takeoff. ARFs, almost ready to fly planes, are a relatively new development in the RC hobby, maybe 10 or 15 years. They're an outgrowth of LiPo batteries, electric motors, and computer-aided design. All those came together to make it really easy to rapidly produce quality aircraft. Before, there were bits and pieces of ARFs. Linear RC here in Georgia was one. The planes were heavy plastic. They had gas motors, of course. It didn't fly all that great, never really took off. Everybody either built their own airplane or got it at a swap meet. But today, everybody's flying ARFs somewhere. So as I mentioned, when you're building your own airplane, you're thinking about control throws, center of gravity, control direction, just a range of things. It's just in your nature to do it. But with the ARF, some of those may be dropping off a little bit. So let's get to the first item that can cause your ARF to crash. The first and probably most important thing for any airplane to include your ARF is a proper center of gravity location. Every airplane from a Piper Cub to a Boeing 747 has a center of gravity. That is the point where the airplane balances. If you were to magically put your fingers under the wings at that point, the airplane would balance forward and aft. For a straight wing airplane, the center of gravity is typically about 25% back from the leading edge. For a swept wing aircraft, it gets a little bit more complicated how to compute it. But every airplane has a center of gravity. You can see that even with full scale. Occasionally, airliners, if they don't load passengers or cargo correctly on the ground, they actually, with the weight further back from the center of gravity, it'll tip on its tail. And here are a couple examples of real full-scale aircraft that are on their tail because of not observing a center of gravity. Now, every airplane has a center of gravity. This is the universal symbol you'll see on any plans for the center of gravity. The ARFs I've built, primarily FMS aircraft, are very good about having a section in the instructions for center of gravity location, so you can measure it. It is measured back from the leading edge of the wing. I actually mark it on the wing where it is, just so I know where the center of gravity is. Now, you might be thinking, these ARFs are so well designed, why should anybody care about the center of gravity? It should just automatically be located. That is sort of true, except when it's not. I'm going to demonstrate here with the Futura RC model. So this is a Futura, and the links for all these reviews are in the description. Notice the center of gravity. I said that I mark it on the wing. See that little blue mark right there? That's from the directions. I literally marked it on there. That should be the center of gravity that flies. You notice the center of gravity is somewhere about here at this point because there's no battery in the front. You can see that the model's sitting on the tail. It literally goes back like that. This is a 4-cell battery. This is what will find your center of gravity. And I bring this up because there's enough space in the nose of the Futura that if you aren't careful where you put your battery, if, for example, you put it too far back, your center of gravity could easily be back here. And you'll find for this model to balance correctly, the battery has to be quite far forward. And at this point, it balances out quite well. So the reason this is important is the leads may be a little bit short. There's plenty of room. The battery too far aft, you could well have an aft center of gravity without realizing on this airplane. Very important for this jet. Now, the center of gravity can oftentimes be shown as a point, but really for all aircraft, the center of gravity is a range. There's a forward center of gravity and an aft center of gravity. The plane will fly well within that range. I'll probably pick the middle point for your center of gravity. If you're going to err one way or the other, if you have the center of gravity a little bit forward, in other words, a little bit nose heavy than planned, the plane will fly okay probably. You'll find that it's a little bit sluggish to pull up, but it'll stall at a higher speed, but it will probably fly okay. On the other hand, an aft center of gravity, or one beyond the aft range, is a tail-heavy aircraft, and depending on the aircraft, that can be very nervous, jumpy, going up and down in pitch, and it may be such that you can't control it with elevator if the CG is too far aft. Another discussion on center of gravity is the FMS T-28. This is a fun little sport flyer. It's a light airplane. It weighs about a pound. It uses just this little 2-cell battery. But what happens on here is you can see inside there's a ton of room for the battery. It could go anywhere along here. Again, I've marked the center of gravity right here. This is panel line located here. But because a lot of the equipment is further aft, the motor's not that heavy, the battery has to go fairly far forward to have the proper center of gravity. You notice they actually have a little shelf and cutout for the battery that fits in here like that. The battery has to be that far forward to have the proper center of gravity. Again, if you're not paying attention to that, and you just put the battery somewhere in here, it could well be an aft CG situation. Aft is very sensitive in pitch. You don't want that. Again, just you've got to check the center of gravity to keep from crashing on takeoff, basically, with your ARF RC model airplane. When I'm building my airplanes, many of your airplanes, they tend to come out tail heavy. We just have structure in the tail. The tails are a little bit heavy. And so oftentimes, if you're building your own airplane, possibly with an ARF, depending on the airplane, you might have to add nose weight. The easiest way to add nose weight, just go down to Walmart, go to the fishing section or Amazon, and buy lead sinkers or fishing weights. There's a whole range of the fishing weights. They're quite heavy. I put them as far forward as possible and just use epoxy to glue them in. It works well to help balancing a tail heavy model. The second guaranteed way to crash your ARF within seconds on takeoff is to have reverse controls. Again, reverse controls, in other words, you move the stick to the left, but the ailerons are such that the airplane rolls to the right. This is a very common problem that can happen with full-scale end model aircraft. B-17s have crashed, F-15s have crashed, any number of airplanes. They typically come out of maintenance, and somewhere along the way, the controls are rigged backwards and you have reverse controls. It happens so quick on takeoff, there's not a pilot around that's quick enough to catch that and cope with it. You're probably going to crash. What full-scale pilots do is they always do a control tech. They move the control stick left, right, back and forth, and rudders, etc., and they look to see where the controls are moving to make sure that they're free and moving in the correct direction. Even airliners have to do that. Of course, with an airliner, you can't see your controls from the cockpit, but there is a computer display that'll show where the controls are doing. You just have to do that. We need to do the same thing for RC model airplanes. With ARFs, it's especially important because, again, everything goes together so quickly, and with a lot of almost ready to fly models, you supply your own receiver. So when you plug in the ailerons, elevator, rudder, even the throttle into the receiver, there's no knowing what direction is programmed in your transmitter to tell that what to do. So it's totally normal when you hook up the controls on your ARF and you test them out, they are backwards, not a problem. You just want to catch that in the shop, and with your transmitter, it's super easy to reverse any control to get them moving in the right direction. This is such a critical thing. I always stand behind my model airplane when I move the controls to just visualize how they're moving. When I move the control sticks just 3 times to make sure they're in the correct direction. And if you do this at the field and you're not in the quiet of your shop, you may miss something. Also, with your RC models, it's always good to check the controls before takeoff to ensure that they're moving, nothing's come disconnected, and they're in the correct direction for that first takeoff. The third way to crash your brand new ARF, it'll take a couple of minutes, but it will result in a crash, is to run your batteries down so that they're so low on stored electrical energy they can no longer power the motor and the airplane. So what to do about this? Some RC sets, modelers can hitch up telemetry to the batteries to read the telemetry on their transmitter. I'm not at that stage of knowledge on how to do something like that, and I take a more simple, straightforward approach. So every battery comes with a battery size here, and how long the battery is going to last depends on a couple of things. Is your flying style? Are you full speed all the time? Do you have a very high performance airplane like a jet where you're going to be at a high power setting draining the battery, or do you kind of cruise around at a lower power setting? So what I do is with every battery, it's very easy to check how full the battery is by using a battery tester. These are just available on Amazon. With a balanced lead, you plug it in and you'll see a percentage of how much power you have. For sure, you want to take off with a full battery. When I have a new airplane, what I'll do is have a very conservative timer on my transmitter. I'll be sure to be on the ground when there's plenty of power on the battery. So for something like the T28 here, 5 minutes is a conservative time for the model. I program that into the transmitter, I hear the voice countdown, and then at between 4 and 5 minutes, I land the airplane, see how much current is in the battery, then I can adjust the time from there. By the same token, when I flew the Su-27, that has 2 electric ducted fans, all going off of one 6-cell battery. My initial flights in that were 2 minutes. That's all I could do to check it because it's just drawing so much power so fast. After you get a feel for how you're flying it, on future flights, you can add the timer and have a little bit longer time. But I do that, and even though I might have shorter flights and going to the absolute limit of the battery, I have not crashed an airplane yet for a battery being low, just by understanding the battery, how I use it, how long it can last with the battery checker. It works out pretty well. At the same time, remember you have 2 sets of batteries. You have the batteries in the airplane. You also have your batteries in the transmitter. These batteries last a long time because they're not operating any motors or equipment. There is a voltage readout here, and what I do is I put down here as a little sticker, 4.3 volts is when it's time for me to replace the 4 AA batteries in this transmitter. I do take a look at this each time I fly to make sure this is not the bad actor with a low battery that could cause the airplane to crash. Thanks for joining me in this video. The ARF aircraft these days are just incredible value, quality, everything for flying. They look great. They're just good things. However, some of your skills atrophy, so just remember to always check the center of gravity. Make sure that you have a game plan for your batteries, and always triple check the controls that they're free and moving in the right direction. Those are 3 errors that can very easily bite you with your almost ready to fly models, and best of luck at the flying field.